All right, so thank you very much for joining us today on the webinar for the new tools on how to migrate from Confluence to XWiki. Some of you may know that last year, around the same time, had a similar webinar for the tools that we had available at that point. And in the meantime, we have created a dedicated wizard migrator that would help you migrate easier from Confluence to XWiki. We have been receiving an increased number of migration requests in the last year, but we have been welcoming clients that wanted to migrate from Confluence to XWiki for a long time, not only in the last year. So the scope of today's webinar is to present the latest integrated wizard and the newest pro macros. We have here in our presentation an agenda as well. First of all, I'll just tell you a couple of words about XWiki, and then we will have a demo on how to migrate from Confluence to XWiki, again, using the latest tools. And then we will have a live Q&A session where you would be able to address questions live, or you can post them in the chat in the meantime, and I will respond to them one by one in the Q&A session. First of all, a bit of an introduction on who we are and what our product is all about. So XWiki SAS is actually the home company for XWiki, the product, and CryptPad, which is an encrypted drive system. XWiki, the open source product, was created actually almost 18 years ago by Ludovic Dubost in France. And XWiki SAS is the main sponsor of the product. We are very happy to still have in the product team in XWiki SAS some of the original architects of the product. And of course, we have received plenty of contributions from the community that help us improve our product each year. Aside from the product team that works on the product and improvements, we also have an extensive client team, which features top professionals that offer services on top of the XWiki product, such as consulting, migration, custom development, design. And we also have a support team that offers technical support and developer support. And last but not least, a client cloud and apps team that also offers hosting and pro applications. On my side, I'm Stefana. I've been an account manager at XWiki for 5 years now. I specialize in migrations, especially Confluence migrations. And I have worked in the past on multiple migrations from Confluence, SharePoint, Office tools, but also all the XWiki instances. Now let's see why we should use XWiki compared to Confluence or compared to any other tool. One very important argument is the fact that XWiki is a prime open source alternative to other software, and especially to proprietary software. Being an open source tool, aside from the technological advancement that we encourage, can also offer you some business security in the sense that you will not have any vendor or data lock-in, meaning that if you have an XWiki system and at some point you do not need any services, or you want to move from cloud to on-premise, you can do that without any restriction. While if you're using a proprietary software, this could be a bit more difficult. Aside from the fact that we are open source and we will always stay the same, our product offers more structure through the data structure technology that we have in XWiki. It's a technology that we also call up within minutes, which allows you to create small applications or data structures where you can add metadata. And you can further create dynamic page templates that you can sort, filter based on, and you can create extensive knowledge bases, documentation networks, and so on. Thirdly, XWiki is extremely extensible. You may have noticed on our website that we have multiple use cases for XWiki. You can do plenty of things from internet to knowledge base, internal or external, even public websites. XWiki has more than 700 extensions that you can use depending on your use case, and it can successfully satisfy multiple needs around knowledge management. And finally, XWiki is highly safe, scalable, and reliable. This is a fact that has been proven along the years in our experience. One example would be Amazon, that uses XWiki for their internal documentation, and they have about 20,000 users that use XWiki daily. And we have also been our scalability and safeness has also been validated by other large clients such as Lenovo, SSF, Historical Lexicon, and many others. Okay, now that we have introduced ourselves a bit, we can move on into the migration part. When we want to move from Confluence to XWiki, aside from the migration itself, we have to make sure that we have all the prerequisites. So first, we'll take a look at the prerequisites, and then we will see a demo of a migration from start to end. So first, on the prerequisites, you of course need an XWiki instance, and it could be either hosted in our cloud or on your premises. We offer hosting with OVH in France. So you can choose this option. Hosting is offered for free within a support plan. And you can also choose to host XWiki on your premises. You can also choose to host XWiki on your premises on different setups. You can find on our documentation website and our commercial website details on how to install XWiki in multiple environments. Aside from the XWiki instance that you need to have and that you need to be an admin of, you would need to consider how you want to handle the users and the authentication. Because in Confluence, you can have either the standard Confluence authentication, or you can maybe have your Confluence instance connected to an LDAP or an SSO. So if that's the case, you would need to consider how you want to manage the users in the new XWiki instance, and check if everything is available for your needs. Thirdly, you would need admin access in your Confluence instance to be able to both export from Confluence and get an API that may be get a token that may be needed for the import. Moreover, you could think about the expectation in terms of history retention and metadata. In XWiki, when importing from Confluence, you can keep your history and the users, the authors and editors of the pages, but you can also choose to not keep this data. And finally, we would encourage you to take a look at the extensions and macros that you're using in Confluence and the ones available on XWiki side. This is because while we have worked extensively on offering as many macros and bridge macros as possible, some of the macros that you're using in Confluence may not be available yet in XWiki. You may see that you have an alternative macro, but if it is not bridged, it means that when you import from Confluence to XWiki, that macro will not be recognized. However, when you edit the page, you can use the alternative feature in XWiki. So we would encourage you to take a look at that as well to know if you would need to make any changes before or after importing from Confluence to XWiki. Okay, now that we know what we need before a migration, let's look at the demo on how to migrate from Confluence to XWiki using the latest dedicated wizard. I will share the respective video. This is a pre-recorded demo. Just a second. Okay, there's a small issue. Just a second while I reload. Okay, let's try again. Okay. All right, so let's watch the demo together, and then we will be able to move into the live Q&A session where you can address any question that you have. Maybe you will get some ideas for questions during the demo itself. This is a demo on how to migrate from Confluence to XWiki using XWiki's latest dedicated migrator and the new set of pro macros. To migrate from Confluence to XWiki, you need a Confluence instance with admin access and an XWiki instance with admin access as well. On the XWiki side, you can choose to host it on your premises or in our cloud, and during this demo, we'll see the configuration that we need to do for both options. Right here in front of us, we have an XWiki cloud demo instance, a version 13.10.3. And the first thing that we need to do is to install the dedicated migrator. To do this, we need to go into the extension manager in our instance, search for Confluence, and we see that we already have the application installed. Moving on to the application itself, the first step of the Confluence migrator is the creation of a new migration profile. We usually recommend creating a migration profile for each Confluence space that you want to migrate to XWiki. So let's see what it looks like. We click here on Create a New Profile. Here we have our migration profile. First, we can offer it a title that we will recognize in the future, depending on what space we want to migrate. The username field depends on whether you have Confluence on cloud or on premise, in a data center or on server. If you're using Confluence Cloud, the username here should be the email that you're using with your Confluence account. And if you have Confluence on premise, this username would be your Confluence ID. So your username, your user ID. Then the token field, if you're using Confluence on cloud or data center, you can get your token by clicking on this link right here. It would redirect you to your Confluence's instance API section. So let's click it, and we see that we're redirected here because we were logged into Confluence. And you can create an API token. Here is your API token that you need to copy and store somewhere because you won't be able to access it anymore from Confluence. So now that we have our token, back to XWiki, we will just paste it here. Again, if we are using Confluence in the cloud or as a data center. On the other side, if you have Confluence server, this token would be your user's password. Then the URL field, this would be the URL of your Confluence instance. If you have a custom URL that doesn't have wiki in the path, please make sure that you click this custom URL box so that your URL would be further converted in the next steps to recognize the space that you're trying to import. And finally, we need to fill in the key of the space that we want to import. So not the title or the name, but the key of the space. Now that the profile is filled in, we save it, and we have here a first step to check the connection to the Confluence instance. Again, it's very important to have admin access and to be logged in the Confluence instance to be able to achieve this result. We check the connection, we see that it was successful, so we can move on. If the connection is not successful, we recommend making sure that you have all the data filled in, and also making sure that you have the custom URL box ticked or not, depending on your URL format. In our case, the connection is successful, so we can start the migration per se. And here we have our migrator in 6 steps. It's very easy to complete the migration through this dedicated wizard. The first step features the prerequisites that you need to have before migrating. The first part refers to the memory that you have allocated on the instance and the cache. The second one refers to heavy processes that should be disabled. Finally, some listeners that you can deactivate in order to make sure that you have all the resources available to migrate. This is needed especially for large spaces, but we recommend having these processes disabled until you finish your migration. If you are using XWiki on the cloud, there are some things that you will not be able to do on your side, namely doing this change in the XWiki configuration file and this one in the XWiki properties. While if you have XWiki on your premises and you have all the configuration files on your machine, you can access those files. If you are a cloud client, please know that you can raise a support to our team, and they will make the necessary configuration for this migration. And if you are on premise, again, you can access those two files. This is what the files look like. So first of all, we need to set the cache to 5,000 in XWiki CFG instead of 500 as it is default. So here we have an XWiki CFG file from a standard distribution of 1345. And we can see that we found the store cache capacity property, and we can set it to 5,000. Then we also need to deactivate the notifications in XWiki properties. So we find our XWiki properties file, and we set notifications enabled to false and notifications emails enabled to false. This will deactivate the notifications on your XWiki instance, and we recommend, of course, turning them back on once you have finished your migrations. After you perform these actions, if you have XWiki on your premises, you will have to restart your wiki to apply the changes. And then you can move on with the rest of the recommendations here. So first of all, to deactivate notifications in our user profile, we need to set the automatic page watching to never, as it is already. Then we can run the process to clean notification preferences if we already have plenty of notification preferences set up. Then we need to deactivate a couple of listeners. Okay, now that we have deactivated all of these listeners, we can go back to the Confluence migrator and make sure that the changes were applied. We can see that now we have ticks here, and those processes were deactivated. That we have all the prerequisites configured, we can move to the next step. Step 2 refers to Confluence-based analysis. In this step, because you have the connection done with the Confluence instance, you can analyze the pages in the Confluence instance to know if you will have any issues at import when importing from Confluence to XWiki. We first have a hierarchy analysis that will let you know if you will have trouble with pages that are too deep in a hierarchy, so that have too long page names. And you can also check if some pages from Confluence already exist on XWiki side. So let's start the analysis. We have here a job log that we can look at, and we can see that the connection was successful. It analyzed the pages in the space that I want to migrate. We see that none of those pages exist in XWiki, so they will be created at the import step. We see that we do not have pages with too long page names or too long hierarchies, so everything will be imported correctly. If you have pages that have too long page names, they will be renamed in the import step, or you can rename them manually on your Confluence instance. The third step refers only to the Confluence export. So we have here the instructions on how to properly export from Confluence. You can also use the link here that will redirect you to your Confluence instance on the space that you have indicated before as being the one that you want to migrate. So in our case, we want to migrate this demo space, and we can either export the full space or just some pages from this space. Let's say that we want to export the whole space in XML. Now that the export is complete, we can download it from here. And we will use this export to import in XWiki. We have the export, so we can move to the next step. In the import step, we'll simply have to choose the export zip file that we have from Confluence and attach it here. And then after you have uploaded your file, you have to click on import. And the conversion will start. You also have a job log that you can look at. You can see that all of these documents were created and we don't have any error. If you have any errors, such as pages that were skipped or pages that could not be imported, you will see here a yellow message and you will see exactly what the issue was with each page. So now that all of our pages were successfully imported, we can move to the next step. Step 5 refers to post-import fixes. If you have pages that were imported without parents, for example, if the parent pages were deleted on the Confluence side, or if you have invalid parents, such as parent pages that have dot in the name, they will be analyzed at this step and their names will be fixed. On the checks, we see that we do not have any document with invalid parent. If you would have had parents that have too long page names or that have a name that is not supported, you'll be able to reduce the name length by clicking on this link. You can also see a report of all the analysis that were done in your migration profile. So here we go to the main page of our migration profile and we can see here the summary, and here we can see all the reports. Now that we did our post-import fixes, we can move on to the final step, which is the nested pages migration. And this is the step that actually recreates the hierarchy that we had in Confluence. You can see already here that the demo space was imported, but the hierarchy is flat. I don't have any child pages like I had in Confluence. So at this step, we first need to compute the plan to see how the pages would be arranged. And we see that we have three parent pages and 3 children under the macros page. If everything looks good, you can execute the plan. Otherwise, you can accept some pages from being moved in this step. Let's execute the plan. At this point, the pages are being moved. We can see exactly how they are converted. And now that everything is in order, we finish our migration. And we are redirected to the homepage of the Confluence migration. And let's see what the pages look like. Here are the pages that we have imported. A small mention here, it's important to know that in Confluence you have the notion of spaces, while in XWiki we call spaces parent pages that can have children and that can be managed as a group of pages. And you can also have sub-wikis. You can create sub-wikis that behave as separate XWiki instances from the wiki index. And you can choose to migrate each Confluence space into a separate sub-wiki, or you can choose to migrate separate Confluence spaces into XWiki spaces or groups of pages as we have right here. Now let's look at our pages. We have here some sample pages from Confluence. Let's take, for example, the macros one, which features multiple macros that are commonly used with Confluence. And we also have some sample pages with common formatting options used in Confluence. We have here an image, Confluence mention that was converted as well. Calendar macro columns. Status, info node warning macros. This is the view PDF macro that was imported as well. This is the view office macro, and this is an include macro from Confluence. These are some examples of macros that were bridged or macros that exist, or identical macros that exist in XWiki as well. Where it can be the case that some macros either do not exist in XWiki, Or an alternative macro exists, but they are not yet bridged, meaning that the parameters and the names aren't mapped. So at the import moment, they are not recognized. If this is the case, we will see an error, as we have right here. You can see that the contributors macro is unknown. This is because the contributors macro from Confluence was not yet bridged on the XWiki side. You can see here an example of a documentation page. You can see that the styles are kept. This is an example of a code macro and some images. The attachments are imported as well, and the same is for the history. You can see the full history of the document in XWiki after import. And you can also compare between the versions of the document. Thank you very much for following this demo. We hope it helps you achieve a successful migration from Confluence to XWiki, and we remain at your service for any questions or concerns related to our product and services. All right, so this was the demo for how to use the new migrator. I saw in the meantime that we already had some questions on the chat. Thank you very much for that. Just going back to the screen sharing for the presentation. Okay, so we saw the demo, and you may have heard during the demo that we can also offer some services in case the tools that we already have are not sufficient, or if you need any more assistance. So for that, we have created a dedicated 10-hour consulting package for Confluence migrations. This usually is for the users to kickstart a migration with Confluence, fix any issue that they may have at the start, or receive some consulting in how to set up their authentication and maybe how to organize their data. You may have heard during the demo as well that this can actually be a good time to rethink the organization of your data. So the 10-hour consulting package could be used for that, and it can be bought online. Aside from this dedicated 10-hour consulting package, we offer multiple services that, in order to assist you on migrating from Confluence to XWiki or other projects. Through consulting, we offer right setup, UI customization, new features, training, and all the professional setup services that you may need. Moreover, we can offer hosting in our cloud if that's something that you would need. With hosting, it could be easier for you because you wouldn't have any infrastructure concern, but you also wouldn't have any lock-in, meaning that if you would choose to go with XWiki Cloud first and then you want to move on premise, you would just export all of your data, import it in your new on-premise instance, and that's it. You won't have any type of lock-in. And finally, but very important, we offer technical support to assist you with the daily usage of your wiki. This is offered both on cloud and on-premise. And it's very important in offering a smooth experience with XWiki because you are able to fix any issue that you may encounter or address any concern that you have, whether it's a bug or maybe a misusage or misunderstanding. So those are services that we offer. Moreover, we have a consultant, we have a partner company in Germany. I think Stefan already wrote a bit higher on the chat. Hi, Stefan. Thank you for being here. So Stefan is our partner in Germany, and he also offers services on top of XWiki and consulting in German. Okay, you can also see here at the end of the presentation some useful links and contacts. First of all, we have the Confluence Migrator documentation on how to use everything that we saw today. Then we have the Confluence migration guide for both options. So what we saw today was the quickest or the integrated method to say so using the wizard, but there's also a more hands-on manual method using the filter streams that can offer you a bit more precision if you want to execute your migration differently. Moreover, we have a dedicated page on our website for the resources and services available for Confluence migrations. We have the link for the pro-macros that my colleague Jean-Sébastien also pasted on the chat. Thank you for that. And we have a link to book a call with me if you'd like to learn more about XWiki or evaluate your project, whether it is Confluence migration or something else. All right, now that we covered everything, this presentation will be sent via email if you opted for this. You can also receive the recording of this webinar if you want to look at it again, and it will also be published on our website. All right, let's move now into the live Q&A session. I'm really happy to see that we already have some activity on the chat and in the notes. So the first question that we have in the shared notes, can you compare the Visual Real-Time Collaborative Editor plugin with the Confluence editor? How is the status? So on XWiki side, we do have a real-time editor, but it is still an experimental module. We do have, so it can be used from versions from 13.10 upwards, but you may encounter issues. It is a priority for us. We are working on this. You can test it, but again, you may encounter some issues. This is a type of extension that would be, you can see, I will paste in the notes as well for the link for the relevant extension, because you may see in the extension manager on XWiki.org, you may see multiple options. But the bottom line is that for WYSIWYG editing, we do have a real-time editor that is currently being tested. However, it's still it's not recommended yet. Second question, admin access needed for migration. Is it space admin access or global Confluence admin access for server? So it would be admin access on the Confluence side if you want to be able to connect to the Confluence instance and use the and get that API token that we discussed, that we saw. However, if you don't have that option and you don't have the connection to the full connection to Confluence, you can still use the migrator, but you would have to skip the second step where XWiki analyzes the pages in Confluence. I think Clemens also wrote this on the chat, so thank you for that. Okay. Okay, and we have the follow-up. My interest would be to delegate the migration to the space owners. So one thing that could be done is to set up, is for the administrator to get an API key and set up the connection. It depends. Oh wait, you mentioned for the server edition. For the server edition, you can use your user and password, but if you have data server or cloud, you would need full admin access. And one other thing, if you don't have full admin access, you won't be able to see the list of macros that you use in Confluence. This could be useful if you want to see how many macros you're using, how many times. You could get that from the Confluence administration. Okay. Are there any limits in the size of the export, 1 gigabyte XML? So it's not an official limit that we impose. From our experience, we saw that if you have exports larger than 1 gigabyte, you may have issues, but this can also be solved with the server configuration. For example, you may have issues with an Nginx timeout or with the memory of your instance. If you need to import larger spaces, this can be achieved, again, either by configuring the instance on your premises with higher resources, or if you want to do larger migrations in the cloud, you could write back to us, to the support and cloud team, and they would temporarily increase the resources or change the configuration so that you can do those large imports, uploads and imports. Fourth question, what about attachments? Are they included during the migration? What about the attachment macro and include macro, not listed in the web page? Yeah, so the simple attachments that you just have on a Confluence page, yes, they are all imported on XWiki side. We can also see in, let's take a look at the instance that we used for the demo. All right. Okay, I'm going to share like this. Okay, so this is the instance that was used for the demo, and in the page, that sample documentation page, you can see here that we had this image attachment that is both attached to the page and displayed on the XWiki page. So this is both supported at the import time. Then what about the attachment macro and include macro? So for the attachment macro, the option to display attachments in XWiki, yes, that's supported. If you migrate attachment macros, they are displayed as we have right here. And there are also other macros that are such as view file, view office macros that are supported. We can see here on this page, this is the view PDF macro from Confluence that was imported, and we also received its attachment. This is a view office macro from Confluence that was also imported, and we have its content. And then in the attachments tab in XWiki, we see the file sample Excel that we see right here, and we see the file sample PDF that we have right here. And then finally for include, this I think depends, I think if I'm not wrong, the include macro is currently available only on the server edition. And for specific versions of this macro, yes, it can be converted. And it's not listed in the Pro Macros list because it is a macro that we already had in XWiki, and it had an identical name, so therefore we didn't have to create any additional bridges. Okay. The fifth question, attachment macro display attachments is, the fifth question's fourth question, we also make heavy use of the exert macro to enable content sharing. Is there a replacement for this? So for the exert macro, yes and no. You can use the include macro, which also offers you the option to show only a section of a page. Let's see what it looks like in edit mode. So here, this is the include macro in edit mode. You can see that it's including the sandbox test page 1. And if you click on more options, you can also specify a certain section that is separated by headings to show that in your page. The exert macro is a macro that we can develop on request if needed, but for the moment it is not available. Okay, the fifth question: what is the maximum size of a space the tool can handle? we don't really have, I think it's kind of related to the question about the 1 gigabyte attachment. We don't have a specific size in terms of pages or attachments. With the configuration that we have in the official recommendation, up to 1 gigabyte export would certainly be supported. If you have larger exports, we encourage you to increase the resources on your instance, or contact us if you have a cloud instance, so that we temporarily increase your resources. But there's no official maximum size. Okay, the 6th question, does the PDF export of large hierarchical page structures work with the current version? The PDF export of large hierarchical structures. So in XWiki, you have some, by default, you have the option to export into PDF or Office. These are the standard options for export, and you can also export your pages in XML or HTML, especially if you want to migrate to another XWiki instance. If you export as PDF, you get some options on how to what to include in this PDF. You can include a cover, a table of contents, header, footer, comments, and attachments. So you can choose to have these or not. And by default, the look and feel of the export, of the PDF export, is quite basic, but it can be further customized depending on your branding or your needs. So we can see here an example. This is the cover, the table of contents, but we don't, we have it lower. And you can see that the export is very simple, and you can further customize it. And for, if I understand the question correctly, exporting multiple pages into PDF is not supported at the moment, but it is something, again, that we can develop on request. 7th question, are all Confluence macros taken into account? So no, as my colleague responded as well, we defined the most common ones. We worked on developing the most common ones. You can see the list of the ones that are supported in the link. Please note that the macros right here, the store on the store. So let's look at them as well. Here at the bottom, you have this list of pro macros. And here in the documentation, you can see all the macros available. So these are macros that we developed indeed because we saw high requests from Confluence users. However, they can be used as standalone macros. So you don't have to be a previous Confluence user or a client that comes from Confluence to benefit from these macros. These are the ones that we recently developed indeed. But other macros, such as include or note or table of contents, already existed in XWiki. If you would need us to tell you exactly what macros that you are using exist or not in XWiki, you can share with us the list of the macros in Confluence, and let me show you what it looks like. Just a moment to chat. Okay, so in the administration of a Confluence instance, right here, in the administration of a Confluence instance, you have this option, you have this section with macro usage. And here you can see all the macros that you're using in your Confluence instance and how many times they are used. Please note that it can be slightly, the counter isn't perfect in the sense that, for example, the create from template plugin may appear multiple times if you are using certain templates for your spaces, but it may actually not be intentionally used multiple times. So what we would recommend if you would need us to tell you exactly what macros are supported, what macros have an alternative, and what macros do not. Okay. Moving on, the 8th question, people have been doing their own templating for special look and feel for their space. Is that style also migrated into XWiki? It depends. It depends on exactly what they did. The layout and columns and sections is kept in XWiki. However, if you're using certain templates that are available only in Confluence, it may not look identical, but some macros are still recognized. So it depends on what they are using. If it's based on layouts, columns, and sections, yes. If they have more advanced macros, the look and feel may be slightly different. However, in XWiki, you can also do that. You can customize the look and feel of your you can customize the look and feel on either at the global level, so on the whole instance, or at the space level. For example, let's say that we want this demo home space. We want to add a different look and feel on it because this would be the space dedicated to a certain department. We can do that by, sorry, not the right user, just a second. Okay. All right. So here, okay. Here, let's say that we want to customize the look and feel on this space. So we need to administer this section, and we can choose to administer the look and feel and the rights at either only on this page or on this page and its children. For example, if we want to customize the look and feel on this section, we can choose to choose another theme, for example, or edit the existing one. We can choose another theme from here. Let's say that we want the cyborg theme. We can also see a preview, of course, before applying our changes. This can take a second because it can be a heavy process. Okay, and you can also customize the look and feel. Customize the rights only for that section. Let's say that for this blog section of our XWiki instance, we want only certain users to be able to access it, or the other way around. We want all the users to be able to access this blog section, but at the global level, we want it to be restricted. So we say here that we, So we say here that we want to manage the rights for this page and its children. So for the blog main page and its children. And we define the rights at that level. So for example, we say that everyone in the view, in the XWiki all group can view this content. So this is a type of change that you can also perform at space level in XWiki or at subwiki level. Okay, question 9. We have a relatively large Confluence instance with several hundred spaces. Would you advise migrating this into a larger XWiki cluster or split them up over several XWiki instances? So we would have to know a bit more about your current setup and type of usage and load on the server. We do support cluster as well, and we can also offer custom cloud instances. We would have to know a bit more to make a recommendation on this. It's also possible to have only a large XWiki instance with multiple subwikis, maybe, to reorganize your content. But in terms of performance itself, yeah, on premise. For the requirements themselves, they depend. We could also share the link for the installation, so the requirements that we usually propose in the documentation. This is the documentation website. I think. Yeah, my colleague is listing now the recommendations. All right. The 10th question, can we run the migration assistant to migrate various Confluence spaces at once, or shall we migrate each space separately? So at the moment, it's one space separately. This is because on each space that you migrate, you would also need to analyze the pages in it. That's the way in which the migrator was specified. We thought that it would be good to be able to address each space separately and address each page. So yeah, for the moment, it's only one space, one by one. What about user accounts and privileges, access to space and page? Yeah, so we just got into that right now. In general, in XWiki, you have a very fine-grained rights system that you can use to define rights at the global level. So in the administration, you have here the users and rights management, and you can manage the rights at the global level. As a principle, when you give a group or a user a specific right to do something, this means that everyone that doesn't have that specific right does not have the right to do that. So specific right means deny for everyone else. You can also prevent unregistered users from viewing pages and make them solve a CAPTCHA before posting a comment on a page. So you can define rights at the global level or at a space level or group of pages. As we saw right now in the blog section, we made it available for all the users, even if at the global level, not all the pages were available for all the users. And you can also customize rights per subwiki. And finally, of course, you can also customize the rights per page. In our experience, it's not highly recommended because it can be a bit hard to follow at some point. But in principle, you can set up any rights that you wish, choosing from the available ones, of course, at any level. Another question would be, we also run Jira. People have used integration between Confluence and Jira to have, for example, Jira diagrams shown in Confluence, automatically updated. Is there a way of coupling XWiki with Jira in this manner? So we do have a macro. I think it's not set up right now. We do have a macro that shows that we do have a Jira macro that allows you to connect to a Jira instance and display issues from that Jira issue. You have a display that shows you the status and the summary of the issue. For showing the charts from Jira, no, that's not available yet. Again, it's something that we could specify together if required. We could also put the link to the. We would also share the link to the Jira macro that we have available in the notes. The 13th question, what about page labels? Is there such a feature in XWiki, and are they also part of the migration? So what we, in XWiki, page labels are actually tags. You can see, for example, here you can add tags on a page. Okay, you can add tags on multiple pages, and the tags that you import from Confluence are indeed imported in XWiki as well. We don't have any example here, so I'm just going to create a couple of tags. Then when you click on a tag, you can see all the pages that have that tag and the activity stream on that tag or label. And in the dashboard, you can also, or on any page actually, but in the dashboard it's already added, you can use what we call a cloud of tags, which shows you the most prevalent tags on the instance. Okay, one more question. We have plenty of user macros. Velocity, can we create or migrate this also into XWiki? So you can certainly recreate macros in XWiki. It's very easy to create macros. If the macros that you have created on the Confluence side can be bridged in so if you have customly created macros in Confluence, when you import them, most likely they will not be recognized by XWiki because it's highly unlikely that we'll have the exact same macro done on our side. However, the content of that macro would appear. So if you would be imported. So afterwards, after the import, you can recreate those macros on the XWiki side. And then the pages that you have imported will show the correct content. Again, it's possible to create new macros in XWiki. We do already have velocity or code macros. And if you have custom macros on your side, you can also recreate them in XWiki, and they will be shown even if they're not shown initially after the migration. So for example, in the page that we saw previously that has this contributors macro that doesn't exist in XWiki. If we were to create the contributors bridge macro in XWiki and install it on this instance, this macro right here that was imported will be visible. And we can see what it looks like also in the source. You can use the wiki editing mode to see what certain macros look like in the wiki syntax. For example, the contributors macro, you can see that it was imported and you have the source of it, but it doesn't exist yet in XWiki. Same for all the other macros. For example, the view file ones, you can see their source here, view XLS and the attachment and name if you want. And because we had the exact same macro in XWiki, it was bridged and it is displayed. If a macro doesn't exist in XWiki, it will not be displayed, but you will still have its content in its code. So you can also recreate macros or have us create macros for you even after the import, or at the same time. All right, let's see if there are other questions on the chat. Okay. Okay, we have another question incoming right now. Yes, that's a very good question. I didn't address it previously. So to validate if, or yeah, didn't phrase it this way before. The question is, how do you validate the migration? The users need to check page by page if all is okay. So the validation actually happens during the migration as well, because you have all those checks with the pages that will not be imported properly, the checks at step 2. And you also have the step 5 that fixes invalid parents. So those are some checks that you can do. Also, you can look at the reports after the import. Let's look at some reports actually. Okay, so it's not available here right now. Just a moment. Okay, we'll take a look at the documentation and explain based on that. I have an issue with the account. So at the after you perform the after you perform the checks in step 2, you can after you perform the checks at step 2 and the fixes in step 5, you can see the report of all the checks and fixes in your migration profile. So that's one way to verify the pages that had issues. Moreover, if the page look okay or not, this of course would also have to be checked manually. But you can also see if the you can also see what macros you have on the Confluence instance and what macros are available on the XWiki side, so that you know what macros could cause issues. Moreover, we have a new script that we use to see all the macros in the XWiki instance that were imported, including the ones that are not recognized. So that's something that would be just a moment. It's something that would have to be released soon. Or it's hidden. Just a second, please. Okay. In just a second, I'll be able to show you the tool, because it's a bit hidden, so you have to know where to find it. Okay, so okay, so let's change the user here to an admin. All right. So as we were saying, in a migration profile at step 2, you have that initial analysis, and then you can see the results in those report pages. You can see the result of the check parents analysis. It tells us that there is no issue with the parents of the pages that were imported. Long hierarchies, long page names, pages not found in Confluence. This is also an analysis that can be run. And pages that were skipped from importing. This is, look, for example, here, because we already imported these pages. The report tells us that if we are to run this migration again, those pages would be skipped because they already exist on the XWiki side. So those are some checks that we do. Aside from this, there are also some tools in the migrator that we can use, and one of them is the list macros tool. You would only need to make sure that you are viewing hidden pages. If you want to view all the tools in the Confluence important documentation tools. To make sure that you view hidden pages, you can go to your profile and change the preferences. Let me show you what it looks like. Here we have the option to display hidden pages. Okay, so here in the list macros, we say that we want to see the missing macros in the demo space that we just imported. And we can see here what are the macros that we imported from Confluence but that don't exist on XWiki side. And we have contributors, create from template, live search, iframe, and so on. So those are some checks that we recommend. Aside from that, in terms of look and feel and structure, yes, some pages could be checked manually. But normally you would know from the start if some pages were not imported or if some macros are not visible. Okay, do you support white blacklisting of external target links? Yes, this is something that we do on if you have cloud, XWiki Cloud, and we can also advise you on how to do that if you have XWiki on your premises. It's something that we do quite commonly. If you're interested in our security policy, we can also share the link to that on these notes. Another question, follow-up, is there a way of doing incremental migrations? I believe that refers to, not sure exactly, if you want to add, okay, so if you refer that if you want to add pages from a space to another, the answer is yes. So for example, if you if you have imported a space partially, maybe it was too big, or maybe you only had you only wanted to migrate some pages. After you do one import, you can also import the rest through a new migration profile, and you can choose to either import in the same space or import at the home level and then move them. In the Confluence Migrator, you have the option, let me open that as well. So here in the import step, you have the option to set up different configuration than the default one, and one configuration is where you want your space homepage to be. So you can either choose the same space, or you can import them anywhere and then move them in a batch afterwards. For example, if I want to move these macros pages under new parent, I have to do move or rename, and then I say I want these macros to be right under demo, right here. And we can say if we want to perform this action to the children of the page or only to the main page. So if we want to move the whole tree under another parent, we do this, and we can see now that the macros, first, the macros page is now a child of demo, and before it was a child of demo home.
You are now on. Okay, maybe I can rephrase the question. The follow-up question was mine. So this is very important to see. That's good. But I was actually referring to something you said in the answer of the previous question. So at our site, we have spaces that are edited 24/7 by several hundred people across the world. And there is probably not one point in time where we can say, okay, now we close down Confluence for a day, do the migration, and continue in XWiki. So would it be possible to migrate the first batch and do a second iteration with change pages a second time around.
So you would like to to import the same pages, but with new versions.
Exactly.
Okay. Yes, this can be done. It requires only a bit of a tweak on the. So this would be done with the manual method of migrating, so that the pages that you already have in Confluence would not be skipped but overwritten. So in the manual method that is using filter streams converter, if you try to import the page that already exists in XWiki, you can overwrite it. So you would have the latest version that you import from Confluence. In the dedicated migrator, by default, the pages that exist already would be skipped. Because this was the most common usage, but again, yes, this can be done simply by using the manual filter streams converter. But just to make sure I understand the use case, you can also yes. Why would it be needed to migrate content at a certain state and then update it?
Because, for example, one of our applications is an electronic logbook for the Bell 2 experiment, which is running in Japan. But the experiment is controlled across the world over all the time zones. So there are different teams in different time zones who take over the control of the experiment during the day. And all these people are live editing. So we can't do a shutdown of Confluence for an entire day. But what we can do is preparatory migration, and then only have a short downtime to do the differences, let's say, between the main migration and the changes that have occurred.
Okay, I see. One other option that we saw in practice would be to migrate to partially migrate departments, maybe. We saw that quite common when you had a really large instance, as you mentioned. You can migrate some spaces and migrate the users as well, or create the accounts on the new platform, and then have each department start using XWiki, but not everyone at a time. For example, if you have different time zones, you can perform the migration for a group of people at 1 hour, and then they would start using that new system, and then for the other group at another hour, and so on. However, so I see it could be a bit difficult to execute. From my point of view, we could look at this into more detail to see if we can create any automated system to migrate more spaces at once, because otherwise, if you have hundreds of spaces, even if you have migrated all of them, so even if you have migrated all of them, if you want to update all of them at once in one day, it would be a significant effort. So if possible for you, if it's possible to discuss more about this, we would be really happy to have a separate call and analyze this need specifically.
Gladly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and we have one more question. So the white blacklisting of external links, we targeted it. We said yes, it's possible on the cloud, and we also can make recommendations on for on-premise. And we'll put here the link to our security policy and security recommendations. For the seventh question, we use raw.io macros in Confluence for diagrams. Is this or a similar one with the import supported in XWiki? So in XWiki, what we have supported is, so we have a diagram macro and a diagram application that is also based on raw.io. It looks like this. Here we have an example of a diagram imported from Gleefy. So this is a diagram that was imported from Confluence. and we can further edit it in XWiki. This is what the editor looks like. You can also make it full screen, and it's a really nice editor. Okay, so we have this diagram application in XWiki. It supports glyphy diagrams, meaning that when you import glyphy diagrams from Confluence, you'll have the option to convert them into XWiki diagrams and then further edit them. We also support the display of balsamic macros. And for Draw.io, the bridge macro is not yet developed. It was requested once more quite recently, so we would have to further analyze it. It shouldn't be a very difficult macro to bridge. We just need to make sure that we have all the parameters correctly mapped. This, for example, is the Balsamic wireframe that shows the resource from Balsamic. So again, to sum up, the alternative is the diagrams application that is actually based on Draw.io. However, currently, when you import diagrams created with the Draw.io application in Confluence, it won't be shown because not all of the parameters are mapped. But you can obtain the exact same functionality by using the diagrams application in XWiki. Okay, let's see if we have any other question. Okay, we also have a recommendation from Clemens, my colleague. Thank you for that as well for Peter's request. Indeed, we can think about other options than just migrating everything at once, such as a script to identify the pages that were edited in the meantime, that would have to be updated. So this is actually a perfect example of how we kind of try to address each use case and see the best option or the best migration plan or the best services that would fit them. Because while the integrated migrator covers most of the needs around the migration, some other more specific needs may not be covered, but we can find a solution for them as well. Okay. We have a new question from Julian. According to the GitHub repository, the pro macros look a little bit abandoned ever since the set of macros we have nowadays was added. And the details macro was apparently removed. Yes, the details macro was removed because there was an issue between the details macro on the cloud system and the server Confluence system. The one that we bridged wasn't the commonly used one, so we had to remove them, and we would have to to create a new one. Is there any kind of sorry? Is there any kind of roadmap for the further development of the pro macros? At the moment, no. The pro macros that we have were also sponsored by a client that wanted some of those macros that needed some of those macros at some point. We do not have a roadmap for this year for these macros. It's important to know that in XWiki SAS we have a roadmap for the product itself, which is actually a roadmap for the product that is also influenced by the community. And we also have a separate roadmap for the pro applications. The pro macros are part of the pro applications, and their roadmap is decided at the end of each year. So while for this year we don't have anything in the roadmap, if you have requests, we are gathering them, and we will use all the input in the we will use all the input on the roadmap for the end of the year. Again, as mentioned, it's possible to sponsor the development on request. But for the roadmap itself, to develop them on the Pro Apps team, it's not they're not included at the moment. Okay. Do we have any other question? I see we're quite over time. I'm sorry that some people had to leave. All right, so it looks like we don't have many other questions. Thank you very much, Stefan, and thank you very much for everyone that joined us today. We really hope that the presentation was useful. But also, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any other question related to XWiki, the services, Confluence migrations, or even other use cases. We are glad to respond, and we can also address individual use cases based on their specificity. You also have Nicoletta has shared the a survey. If it's possible to take a couple of minutes to fill in the survey, we would really appreciate it to improve on the future webinars. And if you have opted for this, you will also receive the shared notes and the recording of this session. Okay, so thank you very much for being here again. Have a wonderful rest of the day, evening, or noon, depending on where you are at. And I hope we will have the chance to stay in touch. Goodbye.